Ohio State did Ohio State things as they lose to Michigan 75-69 to end the regular season. What was missing in Sunday's game that resulted in another loss for the Buckeyes? And Chris Holtman points the finger at himself. All that and more right here on Locked On Buckeyes.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Buckeyes for the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Monday, March the 7th in the year 2022. And today's episode of Locked On Buckeyes is brought to you by Stat Hero. Stat Hero is reshaping the way you play fantasy sports. Dozens of house-based games to play daily. No sharks, no funky props, just your skill versus the lineups you choose. Sign up today at stathero.com/locked-on. I would also like to thank everyone out there for making Locked On Buckeyes their first listen of every single day. At the end of this regular season for Ohio State, the basketball team has done some things that are inexcusable. The way that they have played in the second half, some long scoring droughts, some lapses, mental lapses on defense. And there have been a lot of issues that Ohio State has that have just been game after game after game. They have not been corrected. You're hoping that when you play the Michigan Wolverines, your arch rival at the end of the regular season, all those things you did bad, you start to do better. And so ultimately, you end the regular season on a high note with a W going into the Big Ten Conference Tournament. But on Sunday afternoon, in front of 18,000 strong inside the shot, Ohio State did Ohio State things as they lose 75-69 to the Michigan Wolverines. It was a game that throughout portions of it in the first half, there were times that Ohio State started to do things well. Joey Brunk scored 6 points in 63 seconds. He was a spark at the end of the first half. E.J. Liddell had a couple big blocks, a couple come-from-behind blocks that were E.J. Liddell doing the things E.J. does. Malachi Branham has some nice drives. Jamari Wheeler hit some nice threes. But defensively, there were times that Michigan got Ohio State scrambling. Michigan got Ohio State running all over the place. And the result of Ohio State scrambling on the defense was wide open shots time after time after time after time again. And I'm there at the game, and I'm sitting here thinking, okay, well, it's only a matter of time that Ohio State keeps doing these things, and we know the result of this game. It's not rocket science when you're watching Ohio State basketball. You can almost script it. You can almost depict it the way that things are going to go really easily. You watch a few games like, oh, okay, so they're going to have a scoring drop in the second half. Defensively, they're going to have some issues. They might have a player get hurt or two, which happened in this game. I'll mention that here in a second. And ultimately, Liddell, Branham down the stretch, who is going to be the leader? We all know who should be the leader. But the question is, who is going to be the leader? Not because one guy is fighting over the other, but one person might not give the best player on the court the basketball at the end of the game. I think you know who I am talking about. In this game, E.J. Liddell had 16 points. Malachi Branham led the way with 18 points of his own. E.J. Liddell added in 13 rebounds for another double-double. And then you had Justin Arns, who had 12 points on 4 of 8 shooting from downtown. Justin Arns did hit his first 2 3-pointers, which was a nice spark and a boost. And the Buckeye crowd definitely enjoyed that. But those are the only 3 guys that scored in double digits. Joey Brunk had 8. All of his points came in the first half. Jamari Wheeler had 9. All of his came from downtown, 3 or 4 shooting from three-point land. Eugene Brown III had 2 points. And then Zed Key had 4. Speaking of Zed Key and Meechie Johnson both twisted their ankles in the game. They both, one, Zed Key hopped to the locker room. Luckily, this injury happened on the side where the Buckeye locker room is. So it wasn't like Zed Key had to take a long stroll to the locker room. It was right that same exit and entrance that Ohio State uses during basketball games. Meechie Johnson, He had to get carried off the court in this game. Another problem for Ohio State, Michigan used the pick and roll very, very well to the tune that Devontae Jones and Musa Diabate were just basically doing work, whatever they wanted. If Zed Key or whoever the big man was rolled and came over to the point guard, Devontae Jones, Musa Diabate was wide open, and he had 3 or 4 dunks, and it wasn't like I think he dunked on Eugene Brown III, he dunked on somebody, but everything that he did was right there in the paint with no hesitation. And I'm thinking, what is the problem? Why is it over and over and over? Is this the problem for Ohio State? In the post-game press conference, I believe it was Devontae Jones. It may have been Terrence. I think it was Devontae Jones. He ended up talking about how they knew that Ohio State's bigs were slow-footed. And they knew that Ohio State's bigs, if they rolled to the point guard, Diabate would be open. If they sunk with Diabate, Devontae Jones would be open. They knew that in the film. And this is nothing. This is not anything that's crazy. People see this very, very easily, that Ohio State's bigs are slow. It's not rocket science. And like I mentioned earlier, Ohio State did Ohio State things in this game. It was kind of a script that you could kind of depict and put out there. The thing that would have been great would have been that at the end of the game, Liddell would have taken over, or Brandon would have taken over, but preferably Liddell would have taken over, and Ohio State would have overcome this deficit, which was a drought and a scoring drought and being down most of the second half. Ohio State made it closer, but ultimately it wasn't enough to win this game. 75-69. The Buckeyes lose this game. This is a horrible way to end your regular season. The Buckeyes play Thursday. They play the winner of Penn State or Minnesota. Penn State, Minnesota play on Wednesday. Ohio State plays Thursday night, approximately at 9 o'clock, probably later, because they play 25 minutes after the conclusion of the game that's before them. That starts at 6:30. That game starts at 6:30 Eastern time. All Big Ten Conference games will be at Gainbridge Fieldhouse in downtown Indianapolis, Indiana. I encourage everybody to come over, but I understand if you don't want to, because this basketball team keeps doing Ohio State things, and if they don't make things better, they're going to keep having this same result. Thank you for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen of every single day. Make sure to check out our Locked On Bracket Breakdown March 14th right here on the Locked On Buckeyes podcast feed and YouTube channel. College basketball experts Chris Gordy, Andy Patton, and betting expert Lee Sterling give you in-depth breakdowns on every single matchup. The Buckeyes will be in the NCAA tournament. I encourage you to get ready for that tournament. I have already shared my thoughts and opinions about what the Buckeyes will do in the tournament. We'll get more in-depth with that next week as the tournament comes in. But Locked On has you covered for your bracket breakdown. It's going to be amazing. A lot of good, juicy information. You don't want to miss it. It's a rivalry game. We have all seen and watched rivalry games. Some of us have played in rivalry games, either basketball or football or baseball or hockey or soccer or softball, whatever sport you might perform in, and you say, oh, it's a rivalry game. I got to turn things up a notch. I remember when I was in high school, and it was my freshman year. We played our rival, Lawrence North High School, that Friday night. We went to the football game. I believe the football game was at Lawrence North that year, the rival school. And it wasn't that far from where my high school was. But we all knew, the coaches told us, hey, you're going to go to their school. You're going to wear your game jersey, the jersey you're going to wear the very next day. You're going to wear that jersey to the game. And so you're going to be there. Their players are going to see you. You're going to see them. They're going to talk trash. Don't talk any trash back. Don't do anything. Don't say anything back, but just know when you come back here and you play the football the very next day, because the football game, the varsity game was on a Friday. The game that the JV and freshmen played was on a Saturday morning. When you play your game, you know you have to turn it up a notch. You know you have to crank it up all the way. You got to get all of your intensity out, because this is the biggest game of the year, and we open every single season with our rival. Different than basketball and football and many collegiate sports, because you don't open your season with your rival. Sometimes it's at the end of the regular season, like Ohio State, Michigan. Sometimes in basketball, you may play them twice. maybe in the final month of the season, at the beginning of that month, and then play them at the end of the regular season, the final month of the season. And so you're doing these things in a short amount of time. But when you see those colors, when you see that coach, when you see those players, after you beat them once, especially after you beat them once, you need to turn up that intensity. You need to know that if you're down late in the game with the second half with 10 minutes to go, you got to give it all you got. Yes, you have another game to play, but this is everything right now. When the reason why I am getting a little more animated, my voice may be getting a little bit louder, is because there was a lack of toughness, intensity, a tougher mentality that was missing from this team. And that may derail them in the NCAA tournament deeper and for another reason to what I've already articulated here on this podcast for the past few weeks. This team has problems. 19-10. If you were to tell me going into this season that Chris Holtman could have the chance to win 20 games, but he would lose 20 games in this season, but he would lose the final regular season game for him to keep at 19 wins. He would lose the first game in the Big Ten Conference tournament to stay at 19 wins. And then he would lose the first game of the NCAA tournament to stay at 19 wins. I would have said you're crazy. I would have said you're idiotic. I would have said you have no idea what you're talking about. But that's what's on the line right here. That is exactly what we're looking at. The reality of the situation is that Chris Holtman might not win 20 games this year, and I don't believe Chris Holtman is a bad basketball coach. Almost at football. I'm so ready for football. Spring practice starts tomorrow. But this is a football conversation. This whole show is about this is a basketball conversation. Excuse me. You see how crazy and how whacked out I get when I try to think about in my head the football that starts tomorrow, the football spring practices, and then I'm getting upset about this basketball team. It's infuriating. It's just confusing. And maybe this is a blessing, somewhat blessing in disguise that Ohio State is not a basketball school. Because imagine this happening at North Carolina, Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, Indiana. Now, Indiana's been bad for quite a while. They're getting better this year. But imagine this type of season, the way things have gone, happening at those schools, where those beat writers are all in 100% in on the basketball. Not playing double duty, but they are primarily all on the basketball. Imagine this happening there, where there's mental lapses. Imagine Indiana-Purdue game, which was on Saturday. Imagine Indiana going in there, Mike Woodson, been there for 5-6 years. No, this is only his first year, but he had been there for 5 or 6 years. Then all of a sudden, he's on the verge of not winning 20 games, and he has to win the game against Purdue. It's on the road, just like it was this past week. And Mike Woodson's like, man, we just didn't get it done. But those beat writers in that post-game press conference, they're pointing the finger saying, Mike Woodson, this is a problem we have seen for quite a while. What is the issue? And he's like, oh, man, I don't know, man. It's just not the team. That's not what you want to see. But at this time, we're going to talk more about what happened in the post-game press conference in the final segment of the show. But the tone would be a whole lot different. But the tone would be wild. The tone of the post-game press conference was a little bit different than what the previous. I've only been to Buckeye wins, and I've been there to cover games. This is the first time I've seen a loss, and to see the faces, the look on Adele's face, the look on Justin Arn's face in the post-game press conference. It was alarming. It was what I expected, but it's different when you see it. This team, I don't know how they muster up and how they get the toughness that they need going into the second half of the season. Not the second half of the season. 2 more tournaments. I don't know. I have no idea, because it's very hard to put something together and to pull something out in a conference tournament or an NCAA tournament that you have never, ever, 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 ever had in your bag. However, if you pull it out, sometimes you're not able to keep that thing out. I don't know. I don't know. I think it's a luxury that Ohio State plays Minnesota or Penn State for the first game on Thursday. I think it's a huge luxury. But even then, Ohio State just lost to Nebraska. Nebraska also just beat Wisconsin. I believe Wisconsin won the regular season crown. And so the Big Ten, you say it's parity. I just think there's teams that are playing bad at certain times. I don't think Nebraska's a good football team. Minnesota's an okay football team. I don't think Penn State's a good I keep saying football. I don't think Nebraska's a good basketball team. I don't think Minnesota's an okay basketball team. I don't think Penn State's a good basketball team. They have good players. I just don't think they're good. Do I think this team has what it takes to pull up that toughness that you need, not only in a rivalry game, but knowing that your season is on the line and a trophy is on the line? Do I think they have it in them to pull a certain level of toughness out? No, I don't. I would love to come on here and be more positive, but there's a sign of what I've seen with this basketball team that I saw with the football team. And I don't know if there's something in the water at Ohio State that the toughness that a football team and a basketball team need throughout the season is not there. I don't know if there's something in the water that is causing all of these injuries. Michi Johnson, I'm not sure what's going to happen with him. Kyle Young, concussion. Not sure if he'll be back to play next week. You hope so, but you're not sure if he'll be back to play next week. Zed Key came back in the game after twisting his ankle in the first half, but you're not sure what's going to happen with him going into the Big Ten Conference tournament. This team needs another level of toughness, another added level of toughness. And, well, I just don't know if that's going to come anytime soon. Chris Holtman at Ohio State. I'm going to talk more about him coming up very, very soon. But I talked about it earlier about how Chris Holtman is on the verge of not winning 20 games this year. He has won 20 games in every season since 2011, 2012. His first 2 years coaching at Gardner-Webb in college, he went 11-21 and then 12-20. 2012, 2013 season, Chris Holtman went 21-13, and he has not won less than 20 games in a season since that time. First season at Ohio State, 25 wins. Last year, in a little bit of a shortened season, 21 wins. The luxury is there's more basketball to be played. The downside is I don't know if Ohio State has it in them to beat Minnesota or Penn State on Thursday. I hope they do. I don't know what team will show up, and I don't know if they'll get out of the first round in the NCAA tournament. The YouTube subscriptions keep coming in, and I want to say thank you guys for that. Make sure to head to the YouTube page, Locked On Buckeyes on the YouTube, to make sure you subscribe, and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube page to keep them coming. We're close to 1,000 subscriptions. That's our benchmark. That's our goal. We're going to get there as fast as we can, and we're going to do it with the help of you. Subscribe. Make sure you like this video and like every other video that's on this channel, and make sure you hit the bell so you're notified every time a new video goes live on the Locked On Buckeyes podcast YouTube channel. In the postgame press conference on Sunday, there was a look, not only in the eye of E.J. Liddell, Justin Arns, but also Chris Holtman. You know when you lose a game, it sucks. Of course, Michigan fans, Michigan players, they were hyped. They were excited. Diabate, Devontae Jones, they were all excited about the win, and they were in a good mood. Terrence Williams was the other one at the podium for the Wolverines. Mike Bertelli, last game as acting head coach, and you could tell he was in a good mood as well with the way that things had gone. Of course, you could see how his brain worked as far as how he was approaching this, knowing he was only going to be coaching for 5 games before Juwan Howard comes back. But Chris Holtman's approach and Chris Holtman's mindset, it shows me about a guy that knows he needs to look at himself. Remember how I just mentioned about how Ohio State football and basketball, there's a trend that both of them have that is not really good, a connection that's not really good for either one of them. Another one is Ryan Day and Chris Holtman in press conferences. These are 2 good coaches. I'm not saying they're not good coaches. I think Ryan Day's really good. I think Chris Holtman's really good. I think Chris Holtman is not connecting with these players like you would expect him to. But in post-game press conferences, I remember Ryan Day saying this and Chris Holtman, we haven't seen that before. We gotta look at that in the film and see what happened. We haven't seen that before. We got to look at that and see what happened. In my head, I'm thinking, what are you expecting to happen on the field or on the court? Why is it game 4, 5, 6, 7 in football? We got to look at it. We got to look at it. Why in basketball? Oh, we didn't do this. Oh, we didn't do that. And then all of a sudden at the end of the season, Chris Holtman saying, that's on me. That's on me. That's on me. Or that's my fault. That's my fault. Now, is it your fault for not looking at it in film or for not properly preparing your team for what's going to happen on the court? Could be both. We don't know what happens in film sessions. We don't know how the team is prepared on the practice court for what's going to come next. We don't know. All we get to see is a performance on Sunday or Saturday or whatever day they're playing the basketball on the basketball court. Next week, it'll be in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. It could very well also be Gainbridge Fieldhouse the following week as well. But as Chris Holtman started pointing the finger at himself, I'm sitting here looking at him and thinking about how this looks. What is the mindset? Is the end near? And does he think the end is near for his tenure in Columbus? I don't know if he's going to be up out of town. I know many people on the Twitter, they are off the Chris Holtman train for numerous reasons. This is not the first year that Ohio State has had these issues. It's been a problem. It was a problem last year, and Chris Holtman was here last year. Does he think, does he know, does he believe that he needs to change things quickly and he has to find a different way to connect with these players before his time is up at Ohio State? We got to wait and see. We got to wait and see what happens. But all I know is the more I listen to Chris Holtman talk and the more I realize Chris Holtman is really just realizing what time it is. The more coach points a finger at himself and the narrative goes from the players and the narrative goes from we got to look at it to the narrative goes to that's on me, that's on me, that's on me. It could be a sign of a really, really harsh film session. And maybe, just maybe, he knows his seat is really hot because, man, the performances that we have seen lately are not up to par. Like I've mentioned, Ohio State's not a basketball school. If I talked primarily football and really didn't really recap any basketball games, I don't think many of you would complain at all. If I found a way to have every single show of every single year, football, all football all day long, I'm pretty sure many of you would like that, would accept that. It wouldn't complain at all about the things that are happening right now. But you got to sprinkle in some basketball, and many of you are on the Twitter, and many of you are watching the basketball games, and many of you are fed up with the way this team is going. You know who also is fed up with the way this team is playing? Chris Holtman. Sometimes when a coach is fed up with the team's performance, one or two things happens. One, he knows he may be up out of town. But two, you might see a performance, you might see play from them that you have not seen in a very long time. And it's going to take a pissed off Chris Holtman to make that change and to find a way to light that fire that these players can't light themselves for them to be successful in the upcoming conference tournament. I don't know how successful they'll be. There's a really good chance they'll win their first game on Thursday and then play again on Friday. I believe if they win Thursday, they have the late game again on Friday as well. You got to wait and see what happens. But when a coach points his finger at himself, it could be bad for those players because, man, I've been there before in those practices, those sprints. There's a different level of intensity for them because the coach is not happy and he is not going to take the blame for this because he's not the one on the court. He can take some blame, but if he's taking the blame for it, those players are going to feel his wrath. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of Locked on Buckeyes. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at jsteven07. I would also like to thank everyone for making Locked on Buckeyes your first listen every day. Now is the perfect time to make your second listen Locked on NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your fine podcast.